Her hands were shaking so badly, the bottle of Dom Perignon chattered against the crystal flute. Elena knew that if she walked back into that kitchen empty-handed, she wouldn't just be fired. She would disappear, just like the girl before her. She looked at the man at table 9, Sebastian Vance, a billionaire with a reputation for destroying companies and lives. He was a monster, but tonight he was the only predator dangerous enough to scare off the wolves owning her life. She slid the napkin under his glass. Written in eyeliner were 2 words: "Help me." She expected him to blink. She expected him to call security. Instead, he locked eyes with her, smiled coldly, and whispered 5 words that changed everything. "Do exactly what I tell you." The Obsidian Room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of velvet, mahogany, and secrets, buried deep in the heart of Manhattan. It was the kind of place where senators drank scotch with arms dealers, and where a bottle of wine cost more than Elena's father had made in his entire life. Elena Rossi adjusted the collar of her uniform. It was too tight, intentionally so. Marco, the floor manager, liked his staff on display. "Table 9, Marco hissed, stepping out of the shadows of the service corridor. His breath smelled of peppermint and rot. He gripped Elena's upper arm, his fingers digging into the soft flesh. "Do not mess this up, Elena. Mr. Vance is particular. And you know what happens when our guests are unhappy." Elena didn't look at him. She stared at the floor, nodding once. She knew exactly what happened. 2 weeks ago, a waitress named Sarah had spilled a drop of sauce on a client's jacket. Sarah had been escorted out the back door by the heavy-set security guards, who looked more like mercenaries than bouncers. Sarah hadn't come to work the next day, or the day after. "I understand," Elena whispered. "Good. Smile. You look prettier when you hide the fear." Marco shoved her gently toward the dining floor. Elena took a breath, forcing her heart to slow its frantic rhythm. She picked up the silver tray holding a bottle of 1999 Screaming Eagle Cabernet. Her target was table 9, Sebastian Vance. Everyone in New York knew the name. He was the CEO of Vance Global, a private equity firm that specialized in hostile takeovers. They called him the Wolf of Wall Street, before Hollywood made it a cliché. He was 35, devastatingly handsome in a sharp, predatory way, and rumored to be worth $40 billion. He sat alone. That was rare for the Obsidian Room. Most men came here to make deals or impress mistresses. Vance sat with his back to the wall, scanning the room with eyes the color of gunmetal. Elena approached the table. Her palms were sweating. In her apron pocket, her fingers brushed against the cocktail napkin she had prepared in the bathroom 3 minutes ago. It was a Hail Mary pass, a suicide mission. But earlier that evening, she had overheard Marco talking on the phone in the back office. "The shipment moves tonight. The Rossi girl is part of the package. She doesn't have any family who will miss her." She was being sold, not fired. Sold. She reached the table. "Good evening, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts. "Would you like me to decant the Cabernet?" Sebastian Vance didn't look up from his phone, initially. He swiped a finger across the screen, dismissing millions of dollars with a gesture. Finally, he raised his head. His gaze hit her like a physical weight. He didn't look at her body. He looked straight into her pupils. He was reading her. "You're shaking, Elena," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth but laced with authority. He had read her name tag before she even arrived at the table. "I apologize, sir. It's a heavy bottle," she lied. "Lying is a bad habit," Vance murmured. "Pour." She began the ritual, cutting the foil, uncorking. The pop echoed in her ears like a gunshot. She poured a taste. This was the moment. Marco was watching from the maitre d' station, his eyes like hawk talons. He couldn't see the table surface clearly from that angle. The floral centerpiece blocked his view of Vance's right hand. Elena placed the glass down. As she did, she slid the small white cocktail napkin underneath the stem. The words were written in black, waterproof eyeliner, stark against the white paper. "Help me. They will kill me." She held her breath. Her lungs burned. Sebastian Vance picked up the glass. He swirled the dark red liquid. He looked at the wine, then lowered his gaze to the napkin. He didn't flinch. His expression didn't change by a millimeter. He took a sip of the wine. Elena wanted to scream. Had he seen it? Did he care? To men like him, she was furniture. She was less than furniture. Vance set the glass down, covering the note completely. He looked up at her, his expression bored. "The wine is corked," he said loudly. The room went silent. Heads turned. Marco froze at his station. I beg your pardon, sir," Elena stammered. This wasn't part of the plan. "It tastes like vinegar," Vance said, his voice carrying across the dining room. "Is this the standard of the obsidian room? I expected better." Marco was rushing over now, a fake, oily smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Vance, surely there is a mistake. That bottle is... Are you telling me what my palate detects?" Vance cut him off without looking at him. He kept his eyes locked on Elena. "No, sir, of course not," Marco said, sweating. He turned a glare on Elena that promised violence. "Elena, take this away immediately. Bring the reserve list." "Wait," Vance commanded. Marco stopped. Vance stood up. He was tall, towering over the table. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a platinum money clip. He peeled off 5 $100 bills and dropped them on the table. "I've lost my appetite for wine," Vance said. He looked at Elena. "However, I have an appetite for coffee. But not here. This place smells of desperation." He turned to Marco. "I'm taking your waitress. She's going to get me a coffee across the street. Then she can come back." Marco's smile faltered. "Mr. Vance, that is highly irregular. Elena is on shift. We have policies." Vance took a step closer to Marco. The billionaire was 3 inches taller and radiated a violence that the manager wasn't ready for. "I just bought the building this restaurant sits in, Marco. As of 10 minutes ago, I am your landlord. If I want the waitress to fetch me a coffee, she fetches me a coffee. Or I evict you tonight." The blood drained from Marco's face. He looked from Vance to Elena, his mind racing. He couldn't say no to the landlord, but he couldn't let Elena leave, not with the shipment scheduled for later. "Of course, Mr. Vance," Marco choked out. "Elena, go with Mr. Vance. Be quick." Elena felt like her knees were going to buckle. She stepped back, her hands trembling. Vance walked around the table. He moved into her personal space, close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood and cold rain. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. To the room, it looked like a demanding customer giving a final order. But he whispered, "Do not look at the manager. Do not run. Walk to the front door. If you trip, I will leave you here. Do exactly what I tell you." Elena nodded imperceptibly. She turned and walked toward the heavy oak doors. She could feel Marco's eyes burning a hole in her back. She could feel the eyes of the security guards by the entrance, their hands resting near their concealed weapons. She reached for the brass handle. It felt like ice. She pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool New York night air. The noise of the city, sirens, honking cabs, chatter, hit her. Sebastian Vance stepped out behind her. The moment the door clicked shut, his demeanor changed. The bored billionaire vanished. He grabbed her elbow, his grip like iron. "Move," he commanded. "Where?" she gasped. "The car." A sleek, matte black armored SUV pulled up to the curb instantly, as if it had been waiting for a signal. The rear door swung open. "Get in," Vance said. "They'll come after me," Elena cried, looking back at the restaurant door. "Marco, he has men." "Let them come," Vance said, shoving her into the leather back seat. He climbed in after her and slammed the door. "Drive," he ordered the driver. As the car peeled away into traffic, Elena slumped against the seat, hyperventilating. She was safe. She was out. She looked at Sebastian Vance. He was calmly checking his watch. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Oh God, thank you. You saved my life." Vance turned to her. The streetlights flickered across his face, casting long shadows. He didn't look like a savior anymore. "Save you?" Vance laughed darkly, a sound devoid of humor. "I didn't save you, Elena. I just acquired you." Elena froze. "What?" "Marco was right about one thing," Vance said, pulling a tablet out of the seat pocket and tapping the screen. A photo of Elena appeared. "You are part of a shipment. But you didn't think a low-level thug like Marco ran a multi-million-dollar trafficking ring, did you?" Elena pressed herself against the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Who are you?" Vance looked at her, his eyes cold and calculating. "I'm the man who just outbid the competition. You aren't a waitress, Elena. And we both know why Marco was terrified to let you go." He tapped the screen again, bringing up a dossier. "You're the only person alive who knows the combination to the Kincaid ledger." Elena stopped breathing, the secret she had buried for 3 years, the secret she thought no one knew. "Now," Vance whispered, leaning in close again. "You work for me." The interior of the SUV was silent, a vacuum-sealed chamber isolating them from the chaos of New York. Elena Rossi sat pressed against the door, her knuckles white as she gripped the leather armrest. She watched the city blur past, streaks of neon and shadow. Sebastian Vance didn't look at her. He was typing on his phone, the blue light illuminating the sharp angles of his cheekbones. He looked less like a man and more like a statue carved from ice. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "The Spire," Vance said without looking up. "My residence. It's the only place in the city where Kincaid's reach is limited." Limited, not non-existent. Vance finally turned to her. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Nothing is non-existent for Silas Kincaid. You know that better than anyone. But the Spire is a fortress. You'll survive the night. And tomorrow? That depends on how cooperative you are." The car descended into a private underground tunnel that bypassed the street-level traffic. They arrived at a loading dock that looked more like a military bunker. Concrete walls, steel blast doors, and men in suits who didn't look like doormen. They looked like ex-special forces. They nodded to Vance as he stepped out. He didn't open the door for her this time. Elena scrambled out, following him into a private elevator. There were no buttons. Vance placed his palm on a scanner, and the car shot upward. "My father," Elena said, the words tumbling out as the pressure in her ears popped. "You mentioned him." "Arthur Rossi," Vance recited. "The finest forensic accountant the East Coast mob ever employed. A man who could wash money so clean you could eat off it. He died 3 years ago. Car accident. Brake failure." "It wasn't an accident," Elena whispered. "I know," Vance said. The elevator doors slid open. The penthouse was cavernous. It occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest residential building in Tribeca. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city that felt godlike. The furniture was sparse, modern, and expensive. It was beautiful, but it felt dead. There were no photos, no personal touches, just glass, steel, and the dark city below. Vance walked to a wet bar carved from a single block of obsidian. "Whiskey? Water?" "Answers," Elena said, standing in the center of the room. She felt small in the vast space. "You bought me from Marco. You know about the ledger. You aren't the police. If you were, we'd be at a precinct. Who are you?" Vance poured a single glass of amber liquid. He took a sip and turned to face her. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, tossing it onto a chair. Underneath, he wore a holster. The gun was sleek, black, and terrified her. "I am a correcting force, Elena," he said, walking toward her. "The police are bought. The FBI is bureaucratic. I have resources they don't. And I have a motivation they lack." "Which is?" "Silas Kincaid took something from me, too." Vance's eyes darkened. For a second, the Billionaire facade cracked, revealing a deep, jagged wound beneath. 10 years ago, my sister's company was targeted for a hostile takeover by a shell corporation. Kincaid's money. When she refused to sell, they burned her warehouse down. She was inside. Elena gasped softly. "I don't want Kincaid in jail," Vance said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I want him extinct. I want to dismantle his empire brick by brick, dollar by dollar, until he is standing in the rubble of his life. Then I will end him." He stepped closer, looming over her. "Your father created the ledger. It details every asset, every bribe, every shell company Kincaid owns. It is the map to his destruction. Arthur Rossi hid it before they killed him. He told you where it is." "He didn't." Elena lied. It was a reflex, a survival instinct honed over 3 years of hiding in plain sight. Vance sighed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button and a holographic recording projected onto the glass coffee table. It was a grainy video from a security camera. It showed Eleanor, 3 years ago, sitting in a park with her father. He was handing her a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. "We have experts who can read lips, Eleanor," Vance said. "He told you. It's in the spine, Elle. The devil is in the spine." He wasn't talking about the book. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. "If I give it to you, once you have it, I'm useless, and people like you discard useless things." Vance stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "You think I'm like them," he stated. "You just bought a human being for $500 and coffee," she countered, her chin trembling but held high. "You're exactly like them. You just wear a better suit." Vance stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a genuine, dry chuckle. "Fair point," he said. "All right, Elena. A deal. You help me retrieve the ledger. In exchange, I transfer $10 million into an offshore account for you and give you a new identity in any country you choose. I will personally ensure Kincaid never looks for you again." "How can you ensure that?" "Because by the time you land in your new home, Kincaid will be dead." Elena looked at the man. She saw the ruthlessness, yes, but she also saw the pain. He was a monster, perhaps, but he was a monster hunting other monsters. "It's not a book," she whispered. "The ledger isn't a book." Vance waited. "It's a hard drive," she confessed. "My father encased it in the spine of a blueprint case. He hid it in the one place he said Kincaid would never look, because Kincaid has no soul." "Where?" "The St. Jude Repository, the vault beneath the old cathedral in Midtown. It's a storage facility for the Vatican's assets in New York." My father did pro bono work for the church. He rented a box. Vance's eyes narrowed. The Vatican vaults, high security, Swiss Guard training for the internal security, biometric access. We need 2 keys, Elena said. The physical key, which I have. She reached into her bra and pulled out a small, intricate iron key on a chain she had worn against her heart for 3 years. And a retinal scan. Your father is dead. We can't scan his eyes. Not his, Elena said. Mine. He set the account up in my name. Vance looked at the key, then at her. A strange expression crossed his face. Respect? Then we have a problem, Vance said, turning to the window. Why? Because, Vance pointed down at the street, Marco just told Kincaid where we are. Elena ran to the window. Far below, 3 black vans had pulled up to the curb. Men were spilling out. They weren't wearing suits. They were wearing tactical gear. They're here, Elena breathed, her voice catching in her throat. Ares, Vance said clearly to the empty room. A cool, synthetic female voice responded from the ceiling. Yes, Mr. Vance. Activate Protocol Siege Storm. Lock down the elevators. Arm the internal defense grid. And get me the HK 41 Protocol active. Intruder alert. 12 hostiles in the lobby. Breaching charges detected on the freight elevator. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a rack of weapons that looked straight out of a sci-fi movie. Vance grabbed an assault rifle and a tactical vest. He tossed a heavy Kevlar jacket to Elena. Put this on. Tie your hair back. Stay behind me. You said this place was a fortress, Elena cried, struggling into the heavy vest. It is, Vance said, checking the chamber of his rifle. But Kincaid sent the cleaners. They aren't street thugs. They're former Spetsnaz. They don't knock. Boom. The building shook. The sound was muffled but deep, vibrating through the floor. They blew the fire doors, Vance noted calmly. They'll be coming up the stairs, 30 floors. We have 5 minutes. To do what? Call the police? The police response time in this district is 7 minutes. Kincaid pays them to make it 15. We're on our own. Vance moved to a large console table. He tapped the surface, and it lit up with camera feeds. Elena watched, mesmerized and terrified. On the screens, men in gas masks were moving tactically up the stairwell. Ares, vent the stairwell. Halon gas, Vance ordered. On the screen, white gas flooded the stairwell. The men didn't stop. They just adjusted their masks. Rebreathers, Vance cursed. Okay, plan B. He looked at Elena. Can you shoot? I'm a waitress. Today you're a survivor. Here. He handed her a small pistol. Safety is off. Point and pull. Only if they get past me, which they won't. Suddenly, the glass wall of the living room, the one overlooking the terrace, shattered inward. Vance tackled Elena, throwing her behind the obsidian bar, just as bullets chewed up the expensive upholstery where she had been standing. Repelling lines, Vance yelled over the noise of shattering glass. They came from the roof. 3 dark figures swung through the broken window, landing on the plush carpet with sickening thuds. They raised silenced submachine guns. Vance moved with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for a man of his size. He popped up from behind the bar, fired 3 controlled bursts, thwip, 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 and ducked back down. 3 bodies hit the floor. Move! Vance grabbed her hand. They crawled along the floor toward the hallway. Where are we going? Elena screamed, her ears ringing. The panic room is a trap, Vance grunted. If we go in there, they'll just blow the door or starve us out. We need to leave. We're on the top floor. I know. They reached the master bedroom. Vance kicked the door shut and locked it. He ran to the walk-in closet, shoving aside rows of designer suits to reveal a hidden keypad. He punched in a code. The back wall of the closet slid open. Behind it wasn't a room, but a dark, vertical shaft. A gust of wind blew up, smelling of ozone and rain. "The laundry chute?" Elena asked hysterically. "Emergency egress, magnetic braking system. It drops us to the sub-basement garage." Vance grabbed a harness hanging on the wall. He clipped it to himself, then grabbed her, wrapping his arms around her waist and clipping her to him. "Hold your breath," he whispered. "Wait, He jumped. The sensation of falling was absolute. Elena screamed, but the sound was ripped away by the wind. They plummeted 40 stories in darkness. Just as she thought they would die, a magnetic hum whined to life, and they decelerated violently, coming to a soft, bouncing halt at the bottom. Vance unclipped them instantly. They were in a concrete bunker filled with vehicles. Not luxury cars, war machines. "Get on the bike," Vance ordered, swinging a leg over a matte black Ducati that looked modified for combat. "I can't ride." "You don't have to drive. You just have to hold on." Elena climbed on behind him, wrapping her arms around his torso. He felt hard as rock under the Kevlar. The garage door in front of them began to open. But as it rose, Elena saw them. 2 of the black vans were blocking the exit ramp. Men with rifles were taking aim. "Hold on tight," Vance yelled. He didn't aim for the gap between the vans. He revved the engine, the sound screaming like a banshee, and drove straight at a pile of construction pallets stacked near the wall. "You're going to crash." "I'm going to fly," he corrected. The bike hit the ramp. They went airborne. Time seemed to slow. Elena looked down. She saw the tops of the vans. She saw the upturned faces of the mercenaries, their mouths open in shock. She saw the muzzle flashes of their guns, but they were too slow. The bike soared over the blockade, landing with a bone-jarring crunch on the asphalt street beyond. Vance fought the handlebars, the bike fishtailing wildly before finding traction. He gunned the throttle, and they shot forward into the New York night, weaving through traffic at 100 miles an hour. Elena buried her face in his back, sobbing dry, terrified tears. She was alive. "We're clear," Vance shouted over the wind. "But we can't go back, and we can't use my credit cards. We're ghosts now, Elena." She lifted her head. "Where do ghosts sleep?" Vance checked his rearview mirror. "I know a place. Low rent. No questions." The safe house turned out to be a distinct downgrade from the penthouse. It was a gritty boxing gym in Hell's Kitchen that smelled of stale sweat and bleach. The owner, a massive man named Tiny, gave Vance a nod and a set of keys to a back room without asking a single question. Elena sat on a cot, still shaking. Vance was pacing, stripping off his tactical vest. "We have to move fast," Vance said. "Kincaid knows we escaped. He'll be watching the airports, the train stations. He won't be watching the Vatican Bank." "Why not?" "Because he thinks I'm a sledgehammer. He thinks I'll try to hack it or blow it up. He doesn't think I can walk through the front door." Vance stopped pacing and looked at her. "You said the key is in a box at the St. Jude repository. Do you know the protocol for entry?" "My father told me," Elena said, rubbing her arms. "It's appointments only. Very formal. You have to be a member or a proxy. They check ID, they check appearance. It's old money, Sebastian. Like old, Rockefeller, Medici money." Vance nodded. "Then we can't go in looking like this." He gestured to his torn suit and her waitress uniform covered in dust. "I have no money," Elena said. "I have cash stashed here," Vance said. He pulled a duffel bag from under the floorboards. It was filled with stacks of used bills. "Tomorrow morning we go shopping, but not at the boutiques. We need vintage. We need to look like we inherited our money, not earned it." The transformation was jarring. Vance had taken her to a discreet tailor in the garment district, who clearly operated off the books. Elena stood before a mirror. She was wearing a midnight blue velvet gown, high-necked, long-sleeved, modest, yet undeniably expensive. Her hair was pinned up in a severe, elegant chignon. She wore gloves to hide her rough, waitress-worn hands. Vance stepped out of the changing room. Elena lost her breath for a second. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit, cut from heavy wool. He wore a pocket watch. He looked like a devastatingly handsome aristocrat from the 1920s. He looked nothing like the tech billionaire or the gunman from the night before. "Ready, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, offering his arm. "Is that my name?" "For today. We are Thomas and Eliza Blackwood. We are handling the estate of your late uncle." The St. Jude repository was located in the crypts of a deconsecrated cathedral. The entrance was heavy oak and iron. The air inside was cool and smelled of incense and gold. A severe-looking woman with glasses on a chain sat at a desk. "Name?" "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood," Vance said. His voice had changed. It was softer, haughtier. "We are here to access Box 714, the Rossi Trust." The woman peered over her glasses. She scanned them up and down. Elena held her breath. She felt like an imposter in her own skin. "Identification." Vance produced 2 passports. They were perfect forgeries. The woman scanned them. "Very well. Step this way for the retinal verification." They walked down a long stone corridor, lined with statues of weeping angels. They reached a heavy steel door. "Mrs. Blackwood," the woman said, "please look into the scanner." Elena stepped up. This was it. If her father had lied, or if the system had been purged. A red beam scanned her eye. Beep! Access granted. The heavy door hissed and swung open. Inside, the walls were lined with thousands of bronze drawers. It was silent as a tomb. "I will leave you to your privacy," the woman said, retreating. As soon as the door clicked shut, Vance dropped the act. "Box 714, find it." Elena scanned the numbers. "Here." It was at eye level. She took the iron key from her neck. Her hand shook. Vance covered her hand with his own. His touch was warm, steadying. "Breath," he whispered. "You're doing great." She turned the key. The lock clicked. She pulled the drawer out. Inside lay a long, cylindrical tube, a blueprint case. "That's it," Elena whispered. Tears pricked her eyes. "He really left it." Vance grabbed the tube. He popped the cap. He reached inside and pulled out nothing. It was empty. "What?" Vance hissed. "It's empty." "No, no." Elena grabbed the tube. She shook it. Nothing. "He lied?" Vance's eyes went cold. "No, he wouldn't." Elena frantically felt the inside of the tube. Her fingers brushed against something at the very bottom, a false bottom. "Give me your knife," she said. Vance handed her a small pocket knife. She pried the bottom of the tube open. There, taped to the plastic, was a small, silver micro SD card and a folded piece of paper. Elena unfolded the paper. It was her father's handwriting. "Elena, if you are reading this, I am dead. This card contains the ledger. But it is encrypted. The password is the day I realized I was a bad man, but a good father." "A riddle?" Vance groaned. "We don't have time for riddles." "I know the date," Elena said softly. "It was my 16th birthday, the day he quit the life. May 12th. "Good. Let's go." Vance pocketed the card. Suddenly, the lights in the vault turned red. A siren began to wail, a low, mournful sound that echoed off the stone walls. "The silent alarm," Vance swore. "The woman at the desk. She must have flagged the account." "What do? We run." Vance grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door, but as they reached it, the heavy steel bolts slammed home, locking them inside. A voice came over the intercom. It wasn't the woman. It was a deep, gravelly voice that made Eleanor's blood turn to ice. "Hello, Eleanor." "Hello, Mr. Vance. I've been waiting for you to find that for me." "Kincaid," Vance snarled at the speaker. "The ventilation in that vault is airtight," Kincaid said pleasantly. "I'm going to turn off the oxygen now. You have about 30 minutes of air left. Unless, of course, Mr. Vance wants to slide that memory card under the door." Vance looked at the door, then at Eleanor. He looked at the thick stone walls. There was no way out. He looked at Eleanor, his expression unreadable. "Do exactly what I tell you," he whispered. He walked to the door and slid the card underneath. "No!" Eleanor screamed. "That's our leverage." Vance turned back to her. "No, that was the bait." He pulled a second, identical memory card from his sleeve. "I swapped them while you were reading the note." "But we're still trapped." "Yes," Vance said, loosening his tie. "But now Kincaid thinks he's won, which means he'll come down here to gloat. And when he opens that door," Vance pulled out the pocket knife, "I'm going to introduce him to the consequences of his actions." The low, electronic scream of the alarm was deafening, amplified by the stone walls of the vault. The air, already thick, was growing noticeably thinner. Elena watched in horror as Sebastian Vance walked to the sealed door and slid the fake memory card, the decoy, into the space beneath. The booming voice of Silas Kincaid, the unseen hand of organized crime, returned on the intercom. "Smart man, Vance. I knew you valued your 40 billion more than a rogue waitress. Now, unbolt the door from the inside and step away. My men will retrieve the prize." "He's sending his men, not coming himself," Vance said, checking his watch. "He's too cautious." "Then what was the point of handing over the card?" Elena hissed, backing away from the door. Vance ignored the intercom, which was now filled with Kincaid's impatient demands. He knelt and applied the tip of his knife to the floor, near the thick bronze door. He found a seam, almost invisible, where the original stone met the modern steel frame. "Your father," Vance said, his voice strained, "was brilliant. He didn't just rent a box here. He used his access as a contractor for the church to retrofit the vault. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a contingency." Vance plunged the knife into the seam and twisted hard. A tiny click echoed. He pulled at the stone. A section of the wall, disguised to look like a pedestal for a small crucifix, groaned and slid inward, revealing a dark, tight crawl space leading down. "Catacombs," Elena breathed. Her father had planned everything. "Get in," Vance ordered, pulling the small section of wall back to act as a shield. "He's sending the cleaners. We don't have time for elegance." They scrambled into the dust-choked tunnel, just as the heavy steel bolts on the main vault door were manually overridden. Bang! The sound of the door crashing open and Kincaid's men entering the vault was instantly followed by the confused, muffled shouts of the cleaners, realizing the card was a fake and the vault was empty. Vance sealed the opening with a heavy grinding sound, then moved deeper into the shadows of the catacomb with Eleanor. The air was cool and smelled of millennia of dust and forgotten history. For the next hour, they moved silently through the labyrinth beneath the city, following a route only Vance seemed to know. He moved with the confidence of a man who had already mapped every inch of the city's underbelly. They finally emerged from a maintenance hatch in the back alley of an abandoned textile warehouse on the Brooklyn waterfront. The setting sun cast long, grim shadows across the grimy pavement. "We need a moment to breathe," Vance said, checking his phone, a burner he had purchased with the cash. "They will assume we are still running west into Manhattan." "We have the ledger," Elena whispered, tapping the hidden pocket where the real memory card rested. We won. Why are we hiding in a sewer? We only have the map, Elena. Kincaid still owns the territory. Vance walked away, moving toward the edge of the wharf. He looked out over the murky water. He flipped open the burner phone and dialed a number. Elena watched him, heart pounding, adrenaline receding, leaving only exhaustion and hope. Vance lowered his voice, but the waterfront was quiet enough for the sound to carry on the wind. Yes, it's done. I have the package, Vance said. He paused, listening. No, I don't care about the ledger's contents right now. I just want the full payment. Yes, I accept the 20 million. I want it wired to the Zurich account tonight. Elena's blood ran cold. The full payment. And the girl, Vance continued, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. She's a liability now. I'm leaving her here. Your people can come sweep her up and dispose of her. That was the original arrangement, wasn't it? My objective was the ledger. Hers was always collateral damage. Elena felt the world tilt. It wasn't relief she had seen in the vault. It was calculation. He hadn't saved her. He had rented her. He had secured the ledger, and now he was getting paid again, to turn her over to the same forces that wanted her dead. Tears sprang to her eyes, sharp and bitter. She realized the painful, terrifying truth. Sebastian Vance was not a hero. He was just the highest bidder. The Wolf of Wall Street was a wolf, pure and simple. Vance ended the call and slipped the phone into the water without looking back. He dusted his hands and started walking toward her. We need to, he began. Elena didn't wait. The memory card was her last lifeline. She ran. She bolted out of the warehouse, heading for the main street, where a flicker of distant headlights promised civilization. Vance shouted her name, a raw sound of urgency, but she didn't slow. He betrayed me. He betrayed me. She reached the intersection, blinded by the sudden hope of escape. Just as she stepped into the street, a heavy sedan swerved out of the shadows, blocking her path. The rear door opened. A hand reached out, iron strong, and clamped over her mouth. She fought, kicking and struggling, but the person was impossibly strong. She was dragged, kicking and screaming silently, into the back seat. "Nice try, darling." A familiar, silk-smooth voice purred from the driver's seat. Elena looked up. Behind the wheel, impeccably dressed and smiling the smile of a snake, sat Silas Kincaid. "Mr. Vance was kind enough to sell us your location," Kincaid said, his eyes glittering. "He was also kind enough to take our decoy card and leave us the real one." "The real one?" Elena stammered, confused. She felt her pocket, where the actual ledger card still rested. Kincaid held up a small black card between two manicured fingers. "We intercepted his little swap in the vault, Elena. Thank you for the ride. Now let's go home." The car sped off into the night. Elena had the correct card, but Kincaid had her. Elena was dragged from the sedan and thrown onto a cold, concrete floor. The air here was sterile, mixed with the smell of ozone and expensive cologne. Kincaid's headquarters was a converted grain silo complex in a forgotten industrial park in New Jersey, far removed from any jurisdiction. The main room was vast, circular, and dominated by a huge screen showing financial market tickers. Silas Kincaid stood in the center, a man in his late 50s, impeccably tailored, his silver hair swept back. He looked less like a mob boss and more like a CEO of a global charity. He was the kind of evil that hid behind spreadsheets. "Sit up, Elena," Kincaid commanded, his voice soft but cutting. Elena struggled to sit, her hands bound tightly behind her. "That tiresome Vance," Kincaid sighed, taking a seat opposite her in a plush leather chair. "He's loud, disruptive, and has no subtlety." but I must admit his performance in the warehouse was convincing. You truly believed he abandoned you." "Why did he do it?" Elena whispered, still reeling from the double betrayal. "Because it was the only way to get you to separate from him," Kincaid explained patiently, as if instructing a child. "Mr. Vance is a creature of habit. He never keeps his valuables near the target. You were his most valuable asset, Elena, because of your memory. He wanted you to feel betrayed and run to a predetermined point so my team could track you to me." Kincaid smiled. "He used you as a homing beacon, and it worked. Welcome to the den, Elena. Now tell me the code." He held up the memory card Elena had run with. "May 12th, she said instantly. She was too tired, too defeated, to fight that specific battle. Kincaid's smile widened. He pulled a custom laptop toward him, inserted the card and typed 0512. Access denied. Kincaid blinked. His smile vanished. "The day your father realized he was a bad man but a good father," Kincaid hissed. "Why isn't it working?" "It's the year," Elena said, meeting his gaze defiantly. "The year he quit the life. 2007, 05122207. Kincaid's fingers flew across the keyboard. Access granted. A massive encrypted digital ledger filled the screen. Kincaid threw his head back and laughed, a high, manic sound of pure victory. "Yes, the Kincaid ledger, my masterpiece. Every politician, every judge, every offshore account, every hidden gold reserve. Vance wanted to destroy me. I will use this to rule the city." Kincaid was so engrossed in the screen, his back to the main door, that he didn't notice the sudden, absolute silence in the complex. Elena did. The usual hum of the generators, the quiet footfalls of the guards, all gone. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the den into absolute darkness. Boom! A tremendous explosion rocked the complex. Kincaid screamed, leaping from his chair. The emergency red lights flashed on, bathing the scene in a gory glow. From the service vents high above the floor, gas poured out, a non-lethal, fast-acting sleep agent. "Vance!" Kincaid roared, grabbing a pistol from his desk. The main door burst inward, ripped off its hinges. Sebastian Vance stood framed in the wreckage, no longer in a suit, but fully armored in lightweight tactical gear, his rifle leveled. "Hello, Silas," Vance said, his voice calm, ringing in the vast space. "I told you I'd dismantle your empire brick by brick. We're starting with the headquarters." The battle was swift and brutal. Kincaid's remaining cleaners, those who hadn't succumbed to the gas, rushed Vance. He fought with the precision of a machine, moving, shooting, and using the vast, darkened space to his advantage. Elena watched in amazement as the cold businessman turned into a whirlwind of controlled violence. Vance shot the last guard and rushed to Kincaid's desk. Kincaid was scrambling, trying to disconnect the ledger. "You lose, Silas," Vance said, kicking the pistol out of Kincaid's hand. "You can't win, Vance. I have safeguards." Kincaid snarled, his face contorted with hatred. He mashed a hidden button under the desk. A shrill, computerized voice echoed through the compound. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. 50 seconds until core overload." "It's a bomb!" Elena screamed. "If I can't have the ledger, no one can." Kincaid laughed maniacally. Vance looked from the terrified Elena to the ledger still glowing on the laptop screen. 30 seconds, the voice warned. Vance didn't hesitate. He grabbed the laptop, ripped the memory card out, and then smashed the computer on the concrete floor, ensuring Kincaid couldn't retrieve the list of names. He ran to Elena, slicing her bonds with a tactical knife. "We have to go!" Vance yelled. "What about him?" Elena nodded toward Kincaid, who was weeping with rage and defeat. "He chose his fate," Vance said grimly. He grabbed Elena and sprinted for the gaping hole that had been the main door. 10 seconds. They reached the wreckage just as the final explosion tore through the heart of the complex. The roof buckled, and a fiery roar engulfed the silo. Vance threw Elena forward, covering her with his body as they crashed out of the collapsing structure and tumbled down the embankment outside. A moment later, the entire Kincaid silo complex erupted in a blinding flash, sending concrete and fire skyward. Lying in the dirt, coughing from the smoke and dust, Elena looked up at Vance. His face was scorched, his breathing ragged, but he was alive. She reached out and pulled the memory card from his hand. It was hot, but intact. "We did it," she whispered. Vance slowly pushed himself up. He looked back at the burning wreckage where Kincaid lay buried. "We finished the job," Vance corrected, his voice flat. "Now for the payment." He looked at Elena, his face serious. The moment of action was over, and the ruthless businessman returned. He had the ledger. He had his revenge. And now he had to honor the promise made to a terrified waitress. 2 weeks had passed since the explosion in New Jersey. They weren't on a beach or in a penthouse. They were in a discreet, highly secured villa overlooking Lake Geneva. The light was clean, the air was alpine and silent, and the serenity of Switzerland felt like a jarring mockery of the chaos that had defined the last fortnight. Sebastian Vance sat at a minimalist glass table. On the table, he had spread 3 items: a crisp, new Austrian passport bearing the name Elena Dubois, a platinum credit card linked to a newly established Cayman Islands trust fund, and a contract. Elena Rossi, or now perhaps Elena Dubois, ran a hand over the embossed cover of the passport. She was wearing silk pajamas, the first genuinely comfortable clothes she had owned since she was a teenager. "It's done," Vance said, his voice softer than she remembered. He hadn't worn a suit since the explosion. Today, he was in a cashmere sweater, looking impossibly relaxed. "The Kincaid ledger has been scrubbed, analyzed, and disseminated. We fed the information through several channels: Interpol, the SEC, various high-profile journalists. Kincaid's network is already unraveling. The cleaners have been detained, and the bank accounts are frozen." He tapped the platinum card. "This account has $10 million, non-traceable, fully legal. The deal is complete." Elena didn't reach for the passport. She looked out the window at the distant, snow-capped mountains. "And Kincaid?" "He's gone," Vance stated simply. "Buried under 20,000 tons of concrete and structural steel. He'll never hurt anyone again." The silence stretched. It was the silence of finality, but to Elena it felt like the silence of a void. "You honored your promise," Elena said. "I always honor my promises," Vance replied, "especially the ones made under duress. Now you're free. The apartment in Vienna is furnished and waiting. You can start over. No Marco, no Kincaid, no waitressing." "And you?" Vance stood and walked to the window, staring at his reflection. "I'll start the next hunt. Kincaid was just one head of the Hydra. There's always another." "The betrayal in the warehouse," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. "Tell me about it." Vance didn't turn around. "It was necessary. We had 2 hours before Kincaid's network realized the decoy card was fake. I needed him to lead us to his unlisted, impenetrable headquarters. The only way he would deploy a personal extraction team was if he thought he was getting the real ledger and the girl who knew the password." "You used my fear," she accused, though the anger had faded, replaced by a deep sadness. Vance turned back, his gaze direct and unflinching. "Yes, I knew you carried the real card. I knew you would run when you thought I abandoned you. And I knew Kincaid would be tracking the signal of your run. It was a 20-second risk to save your life, and end Kincaid forever. It was the worst 20 seconds of my life. He walked closer. I told you I was a cold man, Elena. The hardest part wasn't fighting my way through the cleaners. It was watching you run, knowing the pain on your face was caused by me. I'm sorry. It was the first apology she had heard from him. It was heavy, and it was real. Eleanor finally picked up the passport, Elena Dubois. It was a blank slate. Safety, freedom, a quiet life where the only danger was boredom. Do you trust me? Vance asked. You saved my life twice, she said, and you risked your life for the ledger, even when you thought the one I had was fake. But you're right. You're a wolf, Sebastian. You scare me. Good, he admitted. You should be scared. I live a dangerous life, but I never hurt my own. He stepped back to the table and picked up the contract. This is the final offer, Vance said, his tone shifting back to the precise, confident billionaire. I don't need a waitress, but I need you. You're fast, observant, and your father gave you the mind of a forensic accountant. You see details in shadows. I need a partner, Eleanor, someone who is loyal and who understands what we're fighting. He pushed the contract toward her. The money is still yours, 10 million. But instead of a new life, you get a new purpose. You become the head of investigative analysis at Vance Global's private security division. Your job is to dissect the next Kincaid. You help me clean up this city, legally and unofficially. It's dangerous, but it's meaningful. Elena looked at the passport, then at the contract. The passport offered peace. The contract offered war. She looked at Sebastian, the man who was a monster only to other monsters. What is the first thing we analyze? She asked, dropping the passport onto the table. Vance's face broke into a slow, satisfied smile, a genuine warmth she hadn't seen before. I knew you were a fighter. He reached for the memory card, which was now plugged into a secure drive. He pulled up the final, highest-level, encrypted file on the Kincaid ledger. It was a list of names under the title, The Oversight Committee. Before he died, Kincaid created a final backup, Vance explained, pointing to the top name on the list. This is the true head of the Hydra. Kincaid was just the muscle and the money launderer. Elena leaned in, her blood pumping with a familiar, terrifying rush. She read the name. It was a name that dominated headlines, a name associated with charity galas and clean politics, Senator Alistair Fincham. The ledger is just the beginning, Vance murmured. Senator Fincham is the architect. He's untouchable, operating in plain sight. Elena looked at Vance, a new fire in her eyes, fueled by both fear and fierce purpose. She had just traded safety for war. Then let's go to war, Elena Rossi said. She didn't miss her waitress uniform at all, and that is how the desperate plea of a terrified waitress led to the downfall of a global syndicate. Elena Rossi faced a monster and found a path to redemption, realizing that the cold-hearted billionaire who bought her was the only man powerful enough to grant her true freedom, the freedom to fight back. She didn't choose the life of ease. She chose the life of purpose, stepping into the shadows beside Sebastian Vance. But the story isn't over. Senator Fincham is still out there, and the real fight has just begun. Did Sebastian truly love Elena, or was she just a crucial asset? Would you have taken the 10 million and the new identity? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video, share it with someone who loves a good thriller, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We need your support to expose the next chapter of the Kincaid ledger. What do you think Elena Dubois' first mission will be? Let us know.